Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. About 10 or 15 years ago, there was a popular book series out called the Left Behind series. I was not a fan. My view of Revelation and the view put forward in these books are pretty far apart. But about that time also, there was a popular fashion trend for women to wear shorts with words printed on their bottoms. I was attending the National Youth Gathering with Redeemer's Youth, and in the store they were offering these shorts with words on only one side. The words said, "Left Behind." Well played. The thing is, I have often been intrigued by some Bible characters whom we might consider were left behind. These folks intrigue me. I wonder about them being so close to the story and action of Jesus, and then things move on without them. There are a lot of great women and men in the Bible that we know about, but what happened to these folks? I'm going to highlight a few of those for you this week. The first one that really came to my attention when I began to think about this, is Justus. If you were in worship yesterday, Justus was mentioned in the first reading, and he has always interested me. To remind you of the story, Jesus chose the 12 to be his disciples, but as you know, Judas betrayed Jesus and then took his own life. So suddenly the 12 was the 11. As the disciples waited for the day of Pentecost, eventually Peter called them together and suggested that they choose someone to replace Judas. Then he says something that surprises us. Peter suggested that they choose someone who had been with them from the beginning and not a newcomer to the faith. Most of us have the idea that it was Jesus and the 12, but Peter's words indicate that there were others with them as well. The disciples considered his words and put forth two candidates, a man named Matthias and a man named Justus. Then they cast lots between them to see who would be chosen. If that seems odd, they believed that God would fix the outcome of the lots to align with God's will for who should be chosen. It ended up that Matthias was chosen, and he was added to the 12. But I've always wondered, what happened to Justus after that? How did he feel when Matthias was chosen and not him? Did he wonder what shortcoming he had that God chose Matthias instead? Or did he celebrate that God had lifted up a new disciple among them? And what happened after that? Did he remain faithful? Did he continue to lead and serve in the early Christian church? I wonder. I can say that the Bible never mentions Justus again. Interestingly, that's true for most of the disciples. For almost all of them, we never hear of them again, and other than Peter, any mention of any of them at all is rare. I like to think that Justus continued on in faith and in faithful service. God welcomes the quiet believer too. Another person who intrigues me in this same way is Zebedee. There he is with his two sons, James and John, going about their business and earning a living by fishing, when suddenly this preacher comes along and calls his two boys, and off they go, leaving Zebedee with the boat and the nets. I'm sure he wondered at how Jesus called his boys and how they responded. Did he wonder why Jesus didn't also call him? How did Zebedee go on making a living without his boys' help? When he went home that day, what do you suppose he said to Mrs. Zebedee about their sons and what happened? What happens inside a person when God chooses someone else? These kinds of questions fascinate me, but it also fascinates me that God does call each of us. We are each called in different ways. Perhaps God's call to James and John was to be disciples. Perhaps God's call to Zebedee was to care for the rest of the family, and perhaps even to provide resources so that James and John could follow Jesus. Perhaps Justus took on roles in the early church or in his community that were essential to the survival of the early church, quietly serving in his place as God had called him. We don't know, but we do know that each of us has been called to follow God. We have been given our own unique gifts and talents and are called and led to give them in response to God's call. Maybe when we see someone else doing something in their faithful response to God, we may feel left behind. We aren't. We are called to something new. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.